teleconferencing service. Enter your access code or enter your attendee ID number, followed by pound. If your line has been muted, press *6 to unmute your own line.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning.
Morning.
All right. Good morning. All right. We got a lot going on. I am going to start with politics and David Chalian.
Good morning, Jeff. Let me just pick up where we left off yesterday about this back and forth over the debates, just because it seems that we saw the Trump campaign take a position, scramble from it, trying to figure out a way, and just be completely outmaneuvered by the Biden campaign. And it now looks like the debates are, there will likely be one remaining presidential debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, and that'll be taking place on October 22nd, whether that's a town hall format and where that takes place and all of that, I think is still to be determined. But there does not seem to be any debate occurring next Thursday as originally planned. And like I said, Biden outmaneuvered Trump on this in every possible way. I do think, I know Virginia will have more about Trump and the White House, but I do think that what you're seeing 25 days out is a president who is running for re-election who is in a desperate spot at the moment, and I think that explains a lot of his behavior and what we're seeing. In addition to his own health issues, it just is a moment. It seems in every which direction, sort of this whiplash style of lashing out at things is it all, the stimulus is a perfect example, like it all is generating from somebody who is in political dire straits with the clock ticking. So I think that's sort of the big political frame of where we are. As for what we'll see on the campaign trail today, beyond this first on-camera appearance by Trump in an interview, is Joe Biden continuing a Western swing out in Nevada today, and we'll see him at about 2:30 p.m. Eastern doing a Latino event, and then at 5:15 p.m. Eastern, we'll see him doing one of those drive-in meetings with voters that he has now sort of become part of the imagery of the 2020 campaign. This comes after yesterday. You saw Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in their joint press avail in Arizona, where Biden made clear this whole notion of the Supreme Court is not something he's going to address before the election. It's this odd thing. It may be the politically prudent route for him, because this issue is obviously putting him between where the electorate is overall and where his base is, and he doesn't want to pick that fight in either direction 25 days before the election. But it does mean, as he acknowledged in his remarks, that he's going to get this question again and again and again, and he just says, I refuse to weigh in on this until after the election because I don't want this to be a story that distracts from larger things. And that's the position he seems to be sticking with and is willing to take the heat for not answering. Obviously, we should continue to press the question, but that is where he is. This morning, the Biden campaign has released a suite of new television ads with very sort of very demographically targeted audiences. So they have released ads today focusing on veterans and military families, on Latino voters, on rural voters, on seniors. 4 key sort of demographic slices, and they're using all that money they've amassed to be able to slice and dice their advertising to specific demographic groups as well, and that's on display today with all those new ads. Speaking of the money they raised, the campaign says they raised $12 million over the course of the night of the vice presidential debate, which included some 35,000 fly swatters that they put up on their online store saying truth over flies. So they made a bunch of money from that at $10 a clip as well. We also learned today, just a note, and I think it's just interesting teaser audio at the moment. We'll learn more when it is on the podcast, but I guess Joe Biden in 1987 sat down with David Frost for an interview that has never aired because he ended his presidential campaign at the time. But in the sort of teaser clip that they put out before this releases on October 14th, he muses aloud about whether or not he could be a president in the mold of Abraham Lincoln or Franklin Delano Roosevelt, if he can truly be a great president. And it's just so interesting on the precipice of this election and where he currently is in this race. To hear, a young Joe Biden at 44 years old, or what he was at the time, sort of musing on that, and now perhaps on the doorstep of becoming president of the United States. So we'll obviously get more interview when they roll it out next week, but that audio teasing it is out there today as well. We have Arlette Tynes in Nevada today, and we have MJ Lee in New York, and obviously Virginia will also have the voting issues, but I think that continues to be a driving election story as well, with all of these court orders that are coming out that we don't yet have a solid calendar in all of the critical battleground states of exactly when votes will be counted because of the continued litigation on that issue. I think that's where we start.
Okay. Thank you, David. Let's move now to Washington and do Trump and COVID and all of Washington, and then we'll open it up.
Okay, so Trump and COVID. As we heard from the president last night, he believes he is ready to hold rallies despite these moments in this interview where he was, lost his breath for a moment and was coughing. He is clearly not completely better, but is talking about rallies in Florida on Saturday and Pennsylvania on Sunday. His doctor last week saying he would breathe a sigh of relief if he makes it through Monday. So this timetable moves this up 2 days. And tomorrow will be day 10, or at least in what we know of when he first tested positive. Conley releasing a letter last night saying he's completed his course of therapeutics, but everyone else says, from the outside that he's not ready to go out. Rick Bright saying he is not well. The president, of course, would not say last night when his last negative test was. And Kevin Liftak reporting this morning, since he returned from the hospital on Monday, only a few senior officials have seen him in person: Meadows, Scavino, and Kushner. Today, we have these events. This first on-camera interview with the Fox doctor, Mark Siegel, who engaged in the mental acuity test with him. This will be his third Fox interview. He also is doing Rush Limbaugh. The last time he was seen by the press corps was September 30th, and there are talk of some event today so people can actually see him in person, but that has not yet materialized. And then, of course, we're watching this unexpected canceling of the planned Pence trip to go back to Indiana to vote today. Instead, he returned to Washington last night, the vice president's office saying a lot of things about what it isn't, including COVID, but not exactly what it is. Also to note that the CDC epidemiologist arrived in Washington to help the White House contact trace, which is completely a useless exercise since this event was now so long ago. I want to note the video of the Don Jr. event with DeSantis in Florida last night, side by side indoors with few masks. And the director of the National Counterintelligence and Security Center calling Trump's COVID a national security issue. In the midst of all of this, Pelosi and Raskin are going to do their thing at 10:15, announce a commission to review whether Trump is capable of carrying out his duties or should be removed. This comes after she's saying she's concerned about he's suffering from disassociation from reality and an altered state of mind. Just to note, Pelosi and the House don't have the power to do this, but, you know, they and Raskin did this before, but clearly taking their side of the situation. On the stimulus talks, there's a lot out there this morning about how Trump is pushing for one. As we know, Pelosi is not moving on her number. And, you know, the real thing here is that the Republicans in the Senate are not going to pass a big bill close to Pelosi, no matter what Trump says. So, you know, this is a move by him to keep the markets, you know, not tanking because it's called off. But the likelihood of such a deal is not likely at all. In terms of voting, to note, 6.6 million people have already voted according to these reports this morning. 44% requested by Democrats, 25.8% by Republicans. Our reporting today, besides the bunch of court cases that David talked about, will focus on these states concerned about violence and guns at the polls. Michigan's expected to release new guidance for law enforcement to deal with the potential of voter intimidation. But many of these battleground states don't have laws prohibiting carrying guns to the polling places. And then just last, noting that Barr is telling Republicans that the Durham report will not be ready for the before the elections. We sort of knew this, but just this is him actively telling Republicans. And that's what I got.
Okay. Look, I think we need to take a step back and look at the bigger picture of Trump, as David Chalian laid out, of a desperate incumbent, trailing badly, knowing he's in trouble, and acting incredibly erratically on his health, on the debates, on the stimulus package. And I do know, I understand that, you know, this is what we've come to expect for the last 3.5 years, 4 years, but it clearly is exacerbated by the time that we're in and the issues that he's dealing with. And I think that we cannot just let it be normalized. He is all over the place and acting erratically, and I think we need to lean into that. Let's open it up to thoughts on politics, Trump, and Washington.
Hey, Jeff, I would just make one note. Virginia mentioned the Don Jr. rally. It's just incredible to me. You know, we spent a little time on it, but maybe it's worth just a second look just because of the Don Jr. rally last night, which showed complete disregard for keeping people socially distanced or wearing masks, et cetera. You know, Karen Pence walking on the stage on Wednesday night with a mask on, which was a complete violation of the guidelines and policy that had been set up by the debate committee and the Cleveland Clinic. And just kind of jarring in the wake of, you know, she and her husband potentially being exposed by the president and everything that's happened there. And then Don Jr. last night having that indoor rally with all those people packed into that room, very few of them with masks on, not socially distanced at all. And it's just hard to put those two things together, that the president and many in his circle are sick or have been sick and exposed, and yet they continue to flaunt, don't wear masks and don't worry about social distancing, et cetera. It's just pretty extraordinary. I'm sure there's some other examples from the last few days that people might draw on where there's cases where things like this have happened, but it's just very jarring to see that, especially in the wake, you know, for Don Jr., his father got sick. And yet he did that anyway. And for Karen Pence, who was violating the rules of the debate, and also her husband could have been exposed by the president, just really extraordinary.
Yeah. So I think we can take both of those examples and absolutely highlight them. I think we should. Other thoughts?
Hey, Jeff, it's David. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
This is probably like a digital right, but I think, as this court packing thing comes back up and up again, I think it's worth doing a little bit of an explainer of how we got to 9 justices. And how we got there is that typically the number of justices track the number of federal circuits, and they reached 9 with 9 circuits and stopped expanding it. Since then, we've added 4 circuits, the 10th and 11th circuit, the DC circuit, and the federal circuit. So there's a rationale behind it. I'm not advocating for it, but it tracked the circuits because each justice was assigned a circuit. And there's no magic to the 9, but I think it's important context. My guess is that would be the kind of argument that the court packers would make, and that might be some context worthwhile at digital right.
Yeah, I think that's a really good observation, and I do think we should do that on digital. Any other thoughts? Okay, I just want to reemphasize that, I think we cannot normalize what has happened here in the last week with Trump and his behavior. And I go back to what David Chalian said, that this is a president who knows he's losing, who knows he's in trouble, is sick, maybe is on the after effects of steroids or not, I don't know, but he is acting erratically and desperately, and we need to not normalize that. Is there anything else in Washington?
Nope, that's what I got.
Okay, and let's move to domestic and COVID and Michigan and anything else on your list, Matthew.
Thanks, Jeff. So obviously, with all the attention on the leadership drama and desperation around COVID, the big picture. I'm sorry. Yes, of course. The big picture remains: America's numbers are still way too high to be heading into this colder weather. The key measures have simply not come down. Not cases, not deaths, not hospitalizations, not positivity rate. It's mid-October, and we're back to where we were in early July on the grand curve, averaging 47,000 new cases a day, and that is bad. Yesterday was a big day for numbers, over 56,000 new cases, 961 deaths. Yesterday's case number and the current average are both at the highest points in almost 2 months. Fauci yesterday saying that this average to feel safe going into winter needs to come, quote, way, way down, well below 10,000. Obviously, it's nowhere near that. Several states reporting record hospitalizations as those tick back up in America. Deaths have been kind of flat in recent weeks, but the latest CDC group of forecasts expect that to change, predicting another 20,000 deaths by the end of October. The big open questions remain on treatments and vaccines. When will the FDA decide, and what will it decide on authorizing these antibody treatments? Medical groups calling on the FDA to proceed with caution in the face of all this White House pressure. And, of course, the words from the HHS Chief Azar that we are about 5 months away from wide availability of a vaccine. On our CNN map today, things look a little worse. 28 states up week to week, only 2 going in the right direction. New Jersey has seen case rates almost double in the past 2 weeks. Yesterday, it reported the highest number since May, the governor calling it a sobering number. In New York, of course, there's still all this tension and confusion about the cluster crackdowns, lawsuits by a group of Orthodox Jews, as well as the Catholic Diocese in Brooklyn over the restrictions on gatherings, the confusion about schools and businesses suddenly closed after reopening. We've got Alexandra Field in New York. There are record hospitalizations in a number of states, including Missouri, Iowa, and Wisconsin. Illinois reporting 3,000 cases yesterday alone, back up to where it was in the spring peak. We have Adrian Broadus in Chicago. Florida reported a big number yesterday, over 3,000 cases. On average, still looking about the same as it was 2 weeks ago with that full reopening of bars, restaurants, and businesses. So we're still watching this. And Miami-Dade schools are fully reopened as of now, remaining grades coming back. Broward schools begin the in-person phase reopenings today. Biana on the education front. From the health team, we'll get an update on Operation Warp Speed at 11 o'clock from HHS. A day after Azar said there'll be enough vaccine for the most vulnerable by the end of the year than the general population in March or April. There's also a WHO news conference at 11. We'll see what comes out of that. We have Sanjay and Jacqueline Howard available. And then just turning to sports and culture for a moment, the NFL still struggling with the season, shuffling the schedule for the second straight week. The Titans Bills moved to Tuesday instead of Sunday as the Titans deal with the worst outbreak in the league. Patriots Broncos moved to Monday after another positive test. And reportedly, Broadway's lights may be out till next summer now. The Broadway League reportedly set to announce the suspension. It will extend from March to June. And then we've got Omar live in South Bend on the backlash at Notre Dame against the school's president, who obviously appeared maskless and then got sick after the Barrett White House event. We've got the wrap piece today, and it's Nick Watt for 4, 6, 8, and 10. And I can pause there or go on to the hurricane.
Well, why don't you go on to the hurricane, finish it up, and then we'll talk about all the domestic.
Gotcha. So flash flooding, storm surge just starting to move in now. Landfall later today, early evening, on what is an already battered, very vulnerable Louisiana coast. And Dave's got a very quick forecast update.
Yeah, this will be the fourth named storm to hit Louisiana. It has winds of 120 miles per hour. Currently, we may see a little bit of weakening today, but this is still expected to be near major hurricane strength when it hits the coast sometime this evening. We're starting to see conditions deteriorate now with the winds picking up. We'll see the hurricane force winds move in this afternoon. We could see a storm surge of up to 11 feet and up to 15 inches of rain. The worst of this will come this afternoon in the evening before the storm moves inland, weakens over the weekend, but it'll still be a flood threat into the weekend in the Mississippi Valley.
So we've got Derek Van Dam up in Delcombe, Louisiana until early afternoon. Martin Savage coming up soon. Ryan Young after that. The full weather team on duty today and through the night. Then on the Michigan plot and kind of the wider implications of it, we're still learning more about the men accused in this kidnap and murder plot, flagging the words of the Michigan Attorney General on New Day a few minutes ago that there are many groups operating out there across different states. This is not just a Michigan problem, she says. It's an American problem. Obviously, the reporting we had last night about several of the suspects, according to a source, being supporters of this Boogaloo movement, and social media revealing these anti-government anarchist views. Today, we're on a mission to talk to friends and family and relatives, coworkers who kind of knew these characters, help us fill in the picture of what's been going on these past few months. The Seidner team going to this business where they supposedly got together to hatch some of the plot to see what we can find out there. She's in Grand Rapids, and we've got Shimon in New York as well on this one. And I think that's it.
Okay, I'd like to make two comments, and then I'll open it up on the domestic front, which is one, I want to once again today and through the weekend encourage us. COVID, we are in a second wave. It is ravishing the country. We cannot lose sight of that just because of everything that's going on with politics and Trump and the election and COVID. The national story of what's happening with COVID remains enormous, and I don't want to lose sight of that. The second thing is the comment I want to make about Michigan and broadening that out. I don't want to drop this story, and so I want to make sure we have enough resources against it on television and digital. This is not obviously just related to the Michigan governor, as we just heard from the Attorney General of Michigan. This is happening across the country. And, they had a plan to kidnap an American governor. And that is just an amazing headline. And I would just ask everybody, if this had been ISIS, we would be all over this in an even bigger way. Okay, if ISIS was trying to kidnap the governor of Michigan, we'd be all over it in an even bigger way. And the fact is, the FBI and as we have been on for a long time, longer than most, we know that these groups are a far bigger threat than ISIS. So, I think there's a lot of questions still to be asked. What did Bill Barr know? What did Homeland Security know? What did the White House know? What was Facebook's role in all of this? What is going on? I want to make sure we don't let up just because we reported it yesterday and Whitmer has done all our interviews. So I want to be all over this. And I also, by the way, where is the Omar Jimenez piece on South Bend running, Matthew?
He's live today. The piece is over the weekend.
Okay, thank you. All right, because I think the Notre Dame story is also important. Okay, let's open it up for thoughts on domestic, please.
Jeff, as we talk about Michigan, we cannot forget about maybe the most important related two words that the president said: liberate Michigan. And you know what? His supporters, those militia people, seem to listen. Those words are powerful and they have an impact. And he said it at exactly the time that the armed people were at the Michigan Capitol. So that connection, I think, is important.
Hey, Jeff, it's Josh. I just want to point out one inherent contradiction as well as we look at the Washington angle at this, and that is that you have the president who continues to say that he is pro-law enforcement. No one is more pro-law enforcement than he is. But you look at these groups, some of these domestic extremists, the Boogaloo Boys and others, I mean, they are inherently anti-police, anti-law and order. And so he can't have it both ways. You can't be silent on these groups because some of them may, make up a portion of his base while also saying that he loves the police. Because as we saw, in this plot, they are after the police. They are after law and order.
Totally agree.
And as you know, I couldn't agree with you more on keeping on the Michigan and the white supremacist groups. For digital, they could re-up the big Boogaloo investigation we did a few months ago with Investigates. It was a great piece, and we're checking back in with those folks, and Sarah's in with those folks too. And there's fascinating stuff there. But also, besides the president, Bill Barr, as we showed this morning, running around the country, appearing at every single event where he can claim that, blue run cities are filled with crime, has said nothing about this plot against a United States governor. Not a word from the Attorney General when it's his law enforcement people and U.S. attorneys who uncovered and busted all these plots and will prosecute them. It is amazing that nothing's coming out of DOJ.
Agreed. And Jim, it's bad. It's bad for, you and I keep agreeing. So I don't know what's going on there, but I couldn't agree more. Other thoughts?
Hi, Jeff. It's Elam. One quick thought about this is that people aren't really calling them terrorists, and to me it seems like there's no way to look at it other than that these are domestic terrorists, and I think we should identify them as such.
Agreed. Okay. Any other thoughts? Okay, international.
Hey, good morning. So we're going to be covering all of that really hard on all of our shows today. But I just want to start my report today with just noting an exclusive from Ivan Watson, who engaged in this months-long investigation. He looks at the multi-billion-dollar U.S. hair product market, beauty stores with braids and extensions. But most consumers don't know where these products are made. He traces back the murky manufacturing supply chain to an area in China where 2 million Uyghur Muslims and other ethnic minorities are detained. So these products are thought to be the result of forced labor, and it's just a really outstanding piece of journalism that we're showcasing on our shows today. On Hurricane Delta, we're prepping all of our overnight shows to really capture all of that reporting tonight. And then just on COVID, Europe reporting now more daily COVID cases than the U.S., Brazil, or India, according to the latest WHO data. And the story across Europe is really, as I said yesterday, governments trying to get control. In France, restrictions on public spaces in 4 more French cities. Melissa has that. The UK Health Secretary saying the country is at a perilous moment. Scotland already implementing measures. SAMAs across all of the UK lines. Italy recording another jump in cases, the highest since April, so we have Dealey on that. For the second day in a row, Germany recording a steep rise in new infections. That's Fred. And then in Spain, national and regional politicians arguing over the extent of lockdowns ahead of a holiday weekend, just really underscoring the economic concerns versus safety, the debate everyone is having, and Al Goodman can get into that. We also this morning see Russia reporting record daily increase in cases since the beginning of the pandemic, and Peskov said the government may also need to take additional action there. So Matthew's up on that story. We also have Shasta looking at all of the LATAM lines, specifically Brazil surpassing 5 million cases, and then ISA has a package on how lockdowns and social isolation are severely affecting the mental health of many. So that's a package she's got today. Countering that with China's COVID status, as their 8-day holiday ends, it seems they saw a very busy travel period, giving their national economy a boost. So Selena has a package looking at how all of that was managed and whether or not they stayed safe. So that's where we start today.
Thank you very much, Penny. Business.
Yes, good morning. The resumption of stimulus talks sending stock higher this morning. Dow futures up 98 points. We're tracking oil this morning, which is also pushing higher, likely hitting its biggest weekly gain since June, as Hurricane Delta has shuttered over 90% of the crude output in the Gulf of Mexico. Alison Kosik is all over that. But all eyes continue to be on D.C., where the president made a complete head-spinning reversal on stimulus talks. As Virginia mentioned, Mattingly reporting the president now telling allies he's interested in a large-scale stimulus deal. The big question now is there political will to strike a deal? Doubtful. And bottom line for Mattingly, this is still very much a long shot. Mattingly and the Hill team all over that, and Christine Romans has been up on that this morning. Meanwhile, the president recuperating from the coronavirus while dropping in the polls, and unsurprisingly, he is retreating to his safe spaces, that is Twitter, Fox, and rallies on Thursday. Trump started and ended his day on Fox, and today participating in an in-person interview since contracting the coronavirus. That interview being aired on Tucker Carlson tonight. Oliver Darcy filed on that in Reliable and is available up on that. And of course, moments ago, the Broadway League announcing a continued suspension of all ticket sales for Broadway through May 30th, 2021. This obviously a huge blow to New York City's tourism sector and Broadway's 97,000 employees. Alison Kosik is up on that. That's where we begin on COVID. I could pause there or move on to a few other stories.
Give us the rest of business, Richard.
Got it. So we are all over the online plot to kidnap the Michigan governor and the role that social media is playing in this. As we know, according to the affidavit, the plot was organized on a private Facebook page, clearly evidence radicalization of these platforms are capable of, and completely predictable considering that Mark Zuckerberg has used the term over and over again that Facebook is made to connect people. Doney has been up and available on that this morning. He also interviewed the founder of 8chan, which has become the home of groups like QAnon, and also the site that the El Paso and Christchurch shooters posted on. The founder telling Doney he's no longer affiliated with the site, worried about conspiracy theorists turning violent around the election, and saying Facebook should have removed the QAnon content a long time ago. And lastly, on Facebook, Brian Fung reporting a damning report from activist researchers this morning who gave a forensic analysis on how Facebook failed to act on hundreds of posts that racked up millions of impressions, even after they previously identified those posts as misleading. This obviously coming a day after they rolled out new policies on voter intimidation, clearly raising fresh questions about how the company is going to be ready for the potential wave of misinformation following November 3rd. Brian Fung is tracking all of those developments, and that's where we begin today.
Okay, good. Thank you. So before we move to digital, I'll open it up one more time. Anybody have anything they want to bring up?
Hi, Trev. Can you hear me?
Sure.
It really seems that focusing on Broadway for the 93,000 employees there, but like with sports, this affects a whole community of people across the country whose lives are about the theater. And I just think that there might be a story, not for today, but in the upcoming days or weeks, regarding this impact on people in that industry, because it's their lives, they're passionate about it, and they're just stuck, on stop. And it really is, tragic. I mean, I know we have it in airlines, but there is flying going on. We have it in sports, but there is some playing going on. But in theater, which affects, small communities, cities, well beyond New York, it's awful. And I think there's a story there. That's all.
Okay. Thank you. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I would pitch Janina Du as somebody to talk to about the theater situation. She and I both serve on the board of a theater right now that is struggling to stay afloat in this environment, and it's a good window into what's going on off Broadway, where a lot of acting professionals are struggling around the country. I thought Rich's point was really well taken.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, digital.
Hey, Jeff, we had 35 million yesterday. The number one story was lip tack on Trump calling into Fox. That was the first Trump calling into Fox. Number two was, not surprisingly, the arrest of the suspects in Michigan. Our top video on the web was Anderson calling out Trump's rage. Right now, our number one story is the Collins story that's leading our sites, with 35,000 concurrents, which is a huge number on the state of Trump, everything we've been talking about this morning. Big stories we have right now, of course, and it was mentioned already, was the distinctive from China. This is the Uyghur kind of hair trade story, forced labor in Xinjiang, and a 9-month investigation, extraordinary distinctive journalism. And we have a great also digital presentation of it. But thanks to Ivan Watson and the whole team for putting that together. It is an extraordinary piece that people will not soon forget. We'll be across Trump shenanigans all day today, and across Pelosi shenanigans too, and the 25th Amendment stuff that she's doing. Our audience is massively interested in the stimulus talks, even though there might not be a there. They are still into that story and every twist and turn on it. And of course, the Michigan follows. We have a really great op-ed from Eli Honig pointing out how this is bigger than just Michigan. Again, all stuff we already talked about. We also have a good piece from business on FBI on Facebook and Misinformation, and the turning point, the terrorism organization and their anti-mainstream media campaign. So I'll leave it there. Other than some great weekend pieces coming. We'll, of course, be on top of Hurricane Delta all weekend long, and we'll keep out the China story we've been talking about. And North Korea has its 75th anniversary. We'll be on that this weekend, and some good stories on COVID and teens and depression and anxiety. And one more distinctive piece on pregnancy loss, and a really beautiful person, I say, talking about that pandemic too. Stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. John. John, are you with us?
Can you hear me now?
Let's move to what? Yes, John, we can hear you now.
Sorry, I was muted. So we're leading with all the lines coming out of the White House. Kayleigh McEnany was just on Fox, casting a lot of doubt whether there really will be any kind of travel or rally tomorrow, as Trump was kind of hinting at yesterday when he was on with Fox.
Obviously, wait to see if we get the results of a test from him today, if they even reveal that if he does. And then we will hear from him again. He promises to call into the Rush Limbaugh show sometime this afternoon, so we'll keep ears on that and watch for any news he makes there. We have a lot of political voices: Gloria Borger, Jeff Zeleny, Molly Ball, who wrote a really strong cover piece for Time yesterday, Aston Herndon on his erratic behavior, the continuing attacks, and just all those political lines that we discussed. And then Sanjay Gupta up next hour, and again with John King on the continuing Trump health questions and whether he's still contagious. And we have some other doctors also to sound off on that. Arlette Saenz is in Nevada with Biden, who we will hear from at 2:30. And then we do have Kristen Holmes with a couple of hits. There are a ton of court decisions involving voting that are important that we want to make sure that we land on and put a spotlight on. We are going to be doing a lot on the more macro coronavirus story, most cases in 2 months, and just the really alarming trends as we head into the cooler months. Alexandra Field stays in the New York City angle. We are getting Omar Jimenez up on the air today, Jeff. We'll peaceful air tomorrow on the Notre Dame backlash. But we will get him on today to begin to address that issue. And on with Brianna, we have a couple of bookings to flag. One is one of the student leaders from Notre Dame. She'll talk to that student. And then we also have the Orthodox Jewish reporter from the Jewish Insider who was attacked the other day in Brooklyn for taking pictures showing no social distancing, no masks. So we want to talk to him about just that incredible backlash that's happening inside those communities. And there are a number of other coronavirus stories we're hitting. NFL, more games postponed. Harrison wants Senator Graham to get tested for COVID for the next debate. And Burke had some interesting comments yesterday on her fears about indoor spread with more people staying indoors. On Michigan, all shows are staying on that story. Sarah Sider taking lead on that. Really going to continue to highlight that really prescient interview she did with the neo-Nazi a few days ago, who specifically called out Michigan and Wisconsin as states to watch when it comes to these militias and these domestic terrorists. So we're going to continue to play that out. We have Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist was just on, and we also have Mike Rogers and Sean Turner. We are taking the broader view on the fears of extremism, especially as we continue to go into the get closer to the election. And then we have Hurricane Delta. Once again, all shows, Derek Van Dam and DeKalb, Martin Savage and Lake Charles. We just had the Lieutenant Governor from Louisiana on about a very battered and bruised state now getting hit by its fourth storm. We'll obviously play that story a little higher as the pictures get better later in the afternoon. And finally, Fareed Zakaria on with Brianna to promote to his doc on how the world sees America.
Okay. Thank you, John. Washington.
Morning. Jake will pick up at 3. We've got Caitlin in both hours with a piece at 4. We'll listen to Trump with Rush today and take that step back on the dire situation he finds himself in. We'll go to the Hill for Pelosi and her gambit. Gloria Philbom, Laura Brown Lopez among our analysts. We got Pam Brown's voting rights wrap package. We'll stay on Michigan and the broader story of what this event signifies about groups like this nationwide. Nick Watt's coronavirus spot is in the 4 today. We've got Sanjay, of course, COVID second wave, Dr. Daniel Varga in the 3, Michael Osterholm as well. And then, of course, hurricane across the 2 hours with reporters and forecasts.
And in the Situation Room, we'll be following the president in desperation and acting erratically with respect to his health, his campaign outsmarted on the debates, the stimulus, et cetera. All of that obviously on display in his interview last night. So we'll see what happens today. Where is he going to do these rallies this weekend? Will he be tested today, as he says he will? What's going on with Pence's canceled trip to Indiana? We'll watch for the sound from the Rush interview, and we'll watch Pelosi and Raskin on the Hill with their 25th Amendment announcement. We'll also keep an eye on Biden at 5:15. We'll also be staying on COVID, big picture, the country in the grips of a second wave, this Broadway suspension until next June, which is a huge new development. So Nick Watt will have all of that in a wrap piece for us. We'll stay on Michigan. and the broader national threat there, far bigger than ISIS. Look into, Wooded Bar, Homeland Security, White House all know about this. Pam Brown will do our War on Voting wrap piece. We'll obviously be watching the hurricane as landfall is approaching during our hours. And we also have Fareed joining to promote his Sunday doc.
Great. Thank you very much. Before we move to the weekend, where we got a lot going on as well, does anybody have anything they want to bring up?
Hey, Kevin, it's David again. I know there's been some conversation offline about whether to call this terrorism. I actually think editorially we're compelled to call it terrorism because under Section 2331 of the Federal Code, domestic terrorism is defined to include conduct to affect the government by mass destruction, assassination, or kidnapping. We're exactly in the four corners of the law. The other thing I would say is this also fits the definition of treason, which is to conspire to commit an act of war against the state. So we're well within this bounds, and I think that's the language we should be using to talk about the nature of the plot.
So David, we have plenty of situations where we always say allege this, allege that, and because even after we've seen somebody shoot somebody, why without a trial and people being convicted are we calling it terrorism?
Because it's the nature of the crime, not the nature of the criminal. We don't say it wasn't a murder or a homicide when someone is killed. What they did, what the plot describes, is a plot of domestic terrorism and a plot of treason. If proven true, they'll be convicted for that. But we don't not talk about the alleged crime. We just talk about the fact that it's not proven. I don't know why we're dancing around this. This is exactly the definition of domestic terrorism that Congress contemplated when they passed this law.
Let me just add here. I did not know that there was any confusion about this, so I'm surprised to hear that there's confusion about this. They are accused of domestic terrorism. I'm not sure why there's any confusion here.
Well, the question is, they're accused of it. I raised it. They're accused of it, but to call it terrorism is different than the allegation. That's all I'm raising.
I don't understand the distinction, Rick.
Okay.
No. I mean, I'm not trying to be difficult, but
right.
I don't think we should dance around this at all. This is a case of domestic terrorism, and they'll be tried in court if found, their guilt will be determined in a court of law. But
I guess the question is whether we call them terrorists. That's the difference, David.
Well, they're accused of domestic terrorism. This is a case
Correct.
of domestic terrorism.
Exactly.
We should not dance around this at all.
I agree with that. It's a question whether we're calling them terrorists.
Well, I also just based on. Go ahead.
Very much terrorists.
Yeah, I mean, if they were from ISIS, we'd call them terrorists. And again, that's the point I'm trying to make is, if this was ISIS, it would be like we would be going crazy. So they would be accused terrorists.
And my additional point is, unlike some of the other things we've seen in the past several years, like in Virginia or even Timothy Say, because this was directed at the head of a state government or a head of state, it falls into the definition of treason. The military plot to overthrow the duly elected head of one of our 50 sovereign states.
So if we put their pictures up on the screen, is the anchors approved to say these terrorists were accused of blah, 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 blah?
No, they call them these alleged terrorists.
They're alleged terrorists.
That's all I'm asking. That's all.
This should be no more difficult than any other accused crime we cover.
That's right. That's all I'm saying.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't know why there's any confusion around this. They are accused of alleged terrorists. They are alleged terrorists.
You're right. Okay, thank you. The only other point I want, I'm sorry, Jeff.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
My second point was going to be that Trump's not going to be interviewed by Rush. Rush is under treatment for his cancer. He's off all week. They're giving him the show.
Yeah.
He's the guest host on a national broadcast. So if you go to rushlimbaugh.com, that's what they're saying.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, and Brian Stelter and Oliver Darcy in the newsletter last night, raised the question of whether or not that actually, if Trump lost, whether or not that would be the next role he would take, which I think is an interesting question to raise. Is there any?
Well, let me ask you this. The only question is this a campaign contribution giving somebody the ability to host something on the national broadcast? I know the FEC is, irrelevant, but there might be a question here about that. If he's going to be the host of the show and not be interviewed, I don't know if we've ever had an example of that in history.
That seems like a great question for Ben Ginsburg.
Jeff, I just want to, based on what David just said about the law and these guys and rising to the level of treason, I just want to reemphasize Jim's point from earlier about Bill Barr, who was paraded around celebrating all of these other events that the Department of Justice has made arrests and initiated prosecutions of individuals around the country, whether it's at protests or elsewhere. And yet in this case, he is absent, completely absent from, whereas the crimes that David is raising this to, treason, are the highest in the land, and yet the Attorney General of the United States, after his FBI and his Justice Department executed this, is absent. And I don't think we can emphasize that enough. New Day did it this morning. Jim brought it up, but I just want to mention it again because I just think it's so important to note the double standard.
Couldn't agree more. That's why I think that we should need to be all in on digging into what did Barr know, what did Homeland Security know, what's Barr's role in all of this, big time. Okay, we're running late. Let's move to the weekend, and let's start with Smerconish, please.
Okay, so on that, if Trump loses, well, right now it's generally understood that Biden has a clear lead right now. I mean, and let's be honest, it's starting to look like a Biden landslide. Peggy Noonan is quoted as saying, "We won't be a win for Joe Biden, but a blowout, a landslide in a polarized country that doesn't produce landslides anymore." I know, Jeff, we don't like to focus on the polls, but poll after poll shows Biden with this huge lead over Trump. Try to find a poll that says otherwise, good luck. Even polls that don't meet our standards, and I find lean right, have him losing. Rasmussen has Biden by 12. The latest CNN, Fox News, NBC polls all have Biden up by double digits. He's not only leading nationally, but in key battlegrounds, in the suburbs. But after the 2016 election, pollsters conducted an autopsy to figure out what the heck went wrong. Did they do enough to avoid a 2016 repeat? Is it even possible the polls would be off once again? How is this different from 2016? Since we're running late, I don't want to go into it, but we did a comparison. A lot of polls from this, like October, Marquette University Law School poll had Clinton up by 6. That same poll shows Biden with only a 5-point lead. New York Times, Siena poll, Clinton up by 7 late October 2016. Same poll right now is Biden up by 7. Now, national polls are different. I won't go into all that. But given the uncertainty around voter turnout during a pandemic, so many voting by mail, can we trust these polls? And polls have a negative effect on voter behavior. People are less likely to participate if a race doesn't seem close. We have the lead researcher on the 2016 autopsy, the director of survey research at Pew, Courtney Kennedy. And Trump is canceling ads in Michigan and all the upper Midwest states, yet pouring money into Facebook. And you have this mysterious Wolverine Watchmen group that flew under the radar, but they were communicating on Facebook. We have Stephen Levy, author of Facebook, The Inside Story. And we also had Steve Scully booked. We still technically do, but that was before he sent that tweet last night to scare Scaramucci, so we'll see. And that's where we start.
Thank you very much. So I just want to let everybody know that tomorrow night at 9 p.m., we're going to be doing our 22nd coronavirus town hall hosted by Anderson and Sanjay. That airs tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Let's make sure we're pushing to that today and tomorrow as we do stories on coronavirus. Let's move to Sunday, please, then, and start with Inside Politics.
We'll be watching as this weekend's events and Trump interviews unfold, a pandemic patient as president acting erratically as his reelection prospects dim. We'll talk to our reporters and our doctors. We'll also take a look at the concerning COVID curves with an IHME modeler. And as our CNN projections put Biden over 270 for the first time, we'll talk to Florida and Arizona battleground reporters about the political dynamics in their states. Still working on our newsmaker on the Michigan terror plot, and that's where we start.
Okay, thank you. State of the Union?
Hey there. We are still working on our bookings. We'll obviously be focusing on the latest with COVID surges, the flailing president and White House. We'll be watching to see if he does end up adding any rallies this weekend, although it doesn't look like it. We do have Kate Bedingfield, the Biden deputy campaign manager, so we'll talk to her about the latest on the campaign. We'll see where we are on the debate negotiations, and obviously ask about Biden's continued refusal to tell the American people his position on the court. We also have Senator Mazie Hirono from the Judiciary Committee to look ahead to the beginning of the SCOTUS hearings on Monday, and we will ask her about Barr and the Whitmer plot and the slurs against Kamala Harris this week, and stand by for further bookings.
Thank you very much. GPS.
Thanks, Jeff. We have Al Gore, former vice president, to talk about Trump, Biden, a divided America, and the prospect of a contested election. If anybody knows about those, he sure does. Our COVID guest is still TBD, but we'll look at how, yes, there might have been an outbreak at the White House, but America and Europe, the whole West, is trending very badly at the moment. Fareed will talk to Cynthia Miller Idris, who's an expert on far-right extremism and militancy, about the kidnapping plot against Michigan Governor Whitmer and why we're seeing a rise in far-right extremism around the entire world. And we will tease to Fareed's new documentary, How the World Sees America.
Right, and we'll get to that in one moment. Thank you. Reliable sources.
All right, we'll look at Trump's safe space media spree that we spent some time talking about today. You know, he's going where his erraticism and desperation won't be questioned. Turning to mental health, how do we talk about Trump's mental health when he's not your patient? As he continues to be the spreader in chief, it's worth noting that we're up to 4 White House reporters now who have been affected. We have the top Twitter exec that we couldn't get to last week. We can talk about domestic terrorism and all that's going on in the election fraud front, and we'll also get into how reliable are the polls.
Okay, good, and thank you. As you heard from Tom, Sunday night at 9 o'clock, we have the latest Fareed Zakaria special, How the World Sees America. Liza, you just want to bring us up to date on that?
Sure, Jeff. Yeah, this is the story of the anger, horror, pity that our allies feel toward Trump and toward America itself, his dangerous embrace of our enemies. What a golden opportunity all of this is for China, surging now towards superpower status, the shock of the world over our COVID catastrophe, and the very real question in a crisis, would our allies even stand beside us?
Okay. So that's Sunday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. Let's make sure we're voting to that. And then at 10 p.m. is the second episode of the new CNN original series, First Ladies. This weekend, it's about Jackie Kennedy. So we have a full slate of original programming this weekend, from the town hall to the Fareed special to First Ladies, all around. Obviously, all of the news that's going on, including the hurricane, which will be hitting tonight and tomorrow, and everything else that's going on. Does anybody else have anything they want to bring up? Then let me just close by saying I think everybody knows that this has been an extraordinary run of news. The last 10 days, almost unlike anything that we've seen in recent times. And I could not be prouder of the entire organization across all of our platforms, in English and Spanish, and linear and digital, domestic and international. This has been an extraordinary time for CNN and an extraordinary time for this country in the world. I want to thank everybody for that. We've got, an incredible 4 to 5 weeks ahead of us. So make sure you pace yourselves. Make sure you stay healthy, stay safe. Thank you for all you've done. Have a great day and a great weekend, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.